delete one of my favorite episodes because the situation has gotten so bad that it's no longer safe to travel there. So unfortunately, the other day I deleted my episode on Nicaragua, a country that I loved. The people are wonderful. It's a beautiful country, and it's just a shame to see the civil unrest that's going on right there right now. And I wanted to give you an update about the country itself because I know a lot of you wrote in that you were inspired to go there. And I wanted to focus on travel safety in general and what steps you can take to make sure you and your family and loved ones are safe. So stay tuned. And it's not all going to be gloom and doom. I brought on my friend Mary, who recently went to Nicaragua after the alerts went out, and she's got an update of what she saw on the ground and some hysterical stories. So there is a little bit of laughter as well as the Debbie Downer. So stay tuned. Before we start with Mary, I want to go over a couple of key things that you can do. And again, I have all this outlined on the website at activetraveladventure.com/safety. And these are the steps that you should take before you venture out, particularly to developing countries, but and modern countries as well these days. Unfortunately, travel safety has become an issue. And generally speaking, everything's pretty good, but you want to know what the areas are that there are risks so that you can mitigate those risks. So here's a step-by-step thing of what you should be doing. Number one, do a little research on your destination. I've got a link on the website that takes you directly to the State Department, and you can plug in the country that you're interested in to see what kind of issues they are having there, whether it's crime, it could be terrorism, it could be medical issues, or whatnot. They actually have an excellent website that is very user-friendly. They also have a safety-coded color map of the world. So at a glance, you can see where the problem areas are. And you want to look for the yellow ones. Those are the safe, good ones. And you'll see as it gets further and further red, the places that you need to avoid. Next up, you'll want to sign up for country-specific alerts. This is a free service offered by the State Department. You enroll and set up a user account. Again, it's free. And then you plug in the countries that you're interested in. And I probably have more than a dozen of countries that I plan on traveling to in the next couple of years. And so every once in a while, if there's a change in the status, I'll get an email. They don't spam you. They only email you when there's a change in the status. So that's really nice to keep you abreast without you doing a whole lot of work. Once you've decided where you're going to go, the next step is to enroll in the Smart Traveler program. And here's where you input on your account where you're going, where you're staying, and that way, if something unforeseen happens, it could be the tsunami that hit Thailand in 2004, it could be a bombing, it could be any kind of civil unrest, whatever it is, at least they know you're there, and if there's an issue, then they may be able to help you. They do their best to ensure the safety of the citizens. However, it's not their job to evacuate you. You still need to have a plan. And the website, again, is very good to help you figure out what your options are. So before you travel, go check out the whole scoop on the country that you're going to, and then also buy travel insurance. And that's super important because not only does it pay you back if you're delayed a certain amount of time or you lose your luggage, or a family loved one gets really sick or dies and you have to cancel your trip or turn around and come back. They also, if you buy the evacuation coverage, will get you out of there for medical emergencies or other emergencies. So it's usually, I think it runs around 2% of the cost of your trip. And that's the stuff that you can't cancel. So I don't buy insurance on the whole amount. It's only the things that I would lose my money, plane tickets, prepaid hotel and Airbnbs, that kind of thing. That's what I insure. And while I've never used it, my friend Mickey did have to use it when we went on safari. So it's worth buying, and I would not travel internationally without that. The next thing you want to do is bookmark the emergency link on the website. That way, if worse comes to worse, you know who to contact. In addition, some of the types of things that you can find on the emergency link is what to do if you lose your passport or it gets stolen. What happens if you become a victim of a crime? What do you do if a loved one goes missing? What happens if you get arrested? If, God forbid, a pandemic breaks out, or you're out in a ship and there's maritime piracy issues, terrorism issues, or any of these other horrible things that unfortunately happen to some people sometimes. You also want to look to see if you're in one of the special groups that might be particularly targeted in certain areas of special concern. Sometimes it's students, sometimes it's women in certain countries, sometimes it's the LGBT community. So check too to see if you are in one of these particular groups and what you should do to mitigate any risk. And lastly, you want to make copies of your passport. Keep one in your suitcase, give one to a loved one or a friend. And then I also email one to myself. So if I lose it and I can't reach anybody, I can always download the one that I've emailed to myself. I want you to travel and to see the world, but I want you to do it smartly. So I want you to travel safe, travel smart, use the links at activetraveladventures.com/safety to ensure that you'll have the greatest, safest trip possible. Now that you know what to do, let's hear what Mary did. And she's a hoot. I think you'll enjoy this interview. See you on the other side. Mary, could you start by introducing yourself and perhaps telling us your age?
Hi, Kit. It's Mary Charlson here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I'm in my mid-50s. I don't know if you need an exact number. I suppose it would be exactly mid-50, 55. I guess we met down at San Diego and are joint adventure travelers.
Sounds great. Now, the reason we're talking today is because I'm a big fan of Nicaragua, but things are starting to deteriorate down there. And you recently went there. Can you tell us a little bit about how all that started, why you decided to go, and then once you found out things were starting to get a little dicey, and kind of lead us through that process?
Well, thanks. It was very much a process to decide if we were actually going to end up going. We had committed a group of 9 girls from our hockey team. I play on the Stanley Cupcakes hockey team, a group of women who've played for the last 10 years. And we thought this would be kind of our anniversary kind of trip. And we had booked a long time ago, and it was to go down to Monty's Surf Lodge, which is, he's a Canadian who established this thing down there in the I think it was 2005, and sort of a family friend of one of the ladies' husbands. And so we thought this would be a great opportunity to go down, do some surfing, some hiking, some climbing, but also have an opportunity to give back to the community and help out with the soup kitchen, various things that they're doing with medical facilities there, and just sort of make it a nice combined trip. Right before we were to leave, and we left at the end of April 28th, I think it was April 18th is when things all kind of blew up with Ortega and the backlash of the people against some of the social programs that he was changing. And at the root of it, really, it's, he was reelected in 2011 and then took away 4-term limits. And so it's turned into a bit of a dictatorship. And at the heart of it is oppression of freedom of speech. And so there had been some protests against students, and there had been some killing in the areas in Managua and Leon. And so we were genuinely concerned about whether this was, politically unstable, whether we should be going.
And so, all right, this happens like a week to 10 days before you go. That's when the U.S. State Department put out the travel advisory saying things are getting, and that was mainly concentrated in the capital at the time. When you found out, how did you decide whether or not you should go?
Well, let me tell you, if I could share the string of emails between 10 women on deciding this, what it came down to was, the U.S. consulate had actually taken their people out of the country. That's a big red flag. The UK was advising against travel. Canada had this advise extreme caution, right? And so it came down to a bit of, there was would our travel insurance kick in? But ultimately, if we thought it was absolutely not safe, we wouldn't have gone regardless. However, we had a few other folks that were on the ground, obviously the people at Monty's, and they were well up the coast. So once we got in and out of Managua, we figured things would be relatively stable. But we also had some other folks that were on the ground in that area, and they were a little bit more reassuring on the day-to-day. But really, we did take it day-to-day up until we decided to leave. And ultimately, what we figured was I think it was the Catholic Church that sort of intervened, and they were at least talking to the government. And we figured there was probably going to be at least a window to safely not only get in, but to get out of the country.
And I assume you're going to avoid any crowds and the normal precautions you would do when there's going to be trouble. You don't want to be looking for it. And you were away in a more rural area.
Yeah, no, we were up in a little place called Hikulilelo, which is north of Chenandaga. So we came in through Managua, went out, along by. We didn't go into Leon on our trip through initially. We came back to Leon before we departed. But we were well north and out of the crowded areas. Basically, you wanted to stay away from big city, possible gatherings, protests, areas where there's universities and students. And that proved to be just fine. But we certainly did monitor it while we were there, and it did impact some of our decisions about days. One of our planned trips to go to Leon, in the middle of it, we decided to put it at the end of the trip, and that again was just sort of taking a look at the political situation and not really wanting to be in the middle of the city if something was apt to flare up.
And for the listeners, Leon is their big university town, so that. Particularly with the students being many of the protesters, that would be an area of great concern that you would need to be on the ground and have good advice whether or not to go there.
Right. But Leon, when we did go there, our last day and on our way back to the airport, is an unbelievably beautiful city. And, it's in a crumbling kind of colonial way. It's, just amazing architecture. The Spanish came their way back.
If I can interject one funny story about Leon that just cracks me up. I was wandering around the city and I came across some construction workers putting a new one of those red clay tile roofs on one of the office buildings or commercial buildings. And literally they were throwing up these stone tiles, one tile at a time, with toss catch, toss catch, toss catch, toss catch over and over and over again for an entire commercial building. Incredible. I didn't see them break one while I watched, and I really wanted to take a picture, but sometimes I feel a little awkward taking photos of people without their permission because I don't know how people feel like being a quote-unquote tourist attraction. So anyhow, I just thought it was hysterical. That man's arm at the end of the day must have been raw.
Right.
So anyway, so you were there, and so everything, since you're back, obviously you made it back safe and sound. Was there any time that you were nervous or scared?
Politically, no, actually. I mean, obviously we monitor things, and the fellow who was one of the partners at Monty's was well connected in through the emergency response, the fire department, and he seemed to have a real pulse on policing what was happening. But we also monitored our own media while we were there, just realizing full well that internationally there might be a different angle that we'd want to know what's going on. So no, that proved to be fine. It was actually some of the more natural, the natural impact of some things that went on that were actually more kind of took it over the edge of adventure travel. If I told you about the tsunami warning?
You mentioned some, but I never got the full scoop. Let's go through them because we all know the real adventure starts when things go wrong.
Absolutely. It was probably a bit foreboding when one of the girls, we were getting the C bus out of Vancouver to get to the airport, and one of the girls saw a T-shirt that this lady was wearing, and it said, bad decisions make for great stories. And we sort of thought, that's kind of like the theme of our entire trip once we got back. It was, let me be clear, going to Nicaragua was a good decision. It was an amazing country, amazing experience on so many levels. But because we were there at the end of April coming into May, we were there till May 7th. It's right at that fringe of the dry season to wet season. And so I think it was like the Friday night. It was, getting towards that. It was into May. And so there was a tropical kind of lightning storm that came through one evening. And we watched it, and it was really fascinating to watch all the lights. And I've been in tropical storms before, and there's nothing quite like it once the rain starts to pound. And anyway, later that night, it was at 4 a.m. when we're in these little, you have to envision this, we're in these little thatched roof huts down by the ocean. We're not, Monty's Beach Lodge is lovely in terms of alternative accommodations in the area, but it's certainly not, your big resort escape. So very, very natural, very just basic. And so we're in this little hut, and this siren goes off, and it's this little zzz, this big thing. And then in Spanish, it's saying tsunami alert, evacuate immediately. And we're like, oh my God. Is this, I laid there just like, is this actually happening? And then anyway, so we kind of gathered, of course the power was out. gathered up our stuff. I had a headlamp, thank goodness, right at my bedside, untangled yourself from your mosquito net and basically put together in pretty hastily what we figured we might be getting out of the country with if we could actually outrun it. Anyway, it was quite comical in hindsight now, because we all got out and then part of our group was off in another area and they had to go back and retrieve them and wake them up because they hadn't actually heard the alarm, because it was the surf was, I couldn't hear the surf. And that was the other thing that kind of alarmed me, is that the rain was pounding so hard. I had convinced myself that the entire water had sucked. Anyway, long story short, what we found out was that it had been a lightning strike on the warning system on the tower. And that had set off a local alarm for a tsunami. So, in fact, there was not a tsunami headed our way. But it's when you sort of talk about your life experiences, that took adventure travel over the top.
I'll bet. Yeah, now that had to be scary. And was there high ground that you could go to?
Well, it's interesting because they had an evacuation route, but I'm looking around thinking, I don't see any high ground. Their plan is then they get people on a bus and you do go off to see high ground. But they said there's about an hour after the alarm goes. And there is certainly an area about 10, 15 minutes down the road where it goes right by the ocean again. So, I wouldn't want to be wasting any time to get out of there. Let's put it that way.
That's for sure. So then you had a couple incidences with some critters. You want to tell us about those?
People are going to not going to want to go, kid.
I know, but look at how you're laughing. You were loving it, or at least the memories of it now. Those become the favorite memories of your trip.
Okay, we'll tell you some more critters, then I have to tell you the good stuff. No trip to Nicaragua would be complete without a scorpion bite, of course. And my girlfriend, actually the one that I also hiked in Peru, Machu Picchu with, she fashions herself a bit of a princess, but I think she lost a princess badge a long time ago with the adventures that we've been on. But we were going up to climb the volcano, and I'm just my memory's trying to retrieve exactly the name of it. It was the Cosaguina volcano. And so we were heading out that morning, and we'd been in flip-flops, most of the trip, because it's so hot, well up into 37, 38 Celsius, so like well over 100 Fahrenheit. And so she sticks her foot in the shoe and immediately pulls it out and goes, "Oh my God, I've been bitten by something." And so we shook it and, tried to figure out what was going on. Couldn't find anything. So we put a bit of, Benadryl on it. And actually, no, we didn't get the Benadryl till after. That's right. And went off and did our hike. And anyway, we came back later that morning, and she took her shoe off, and that's when we found this squished scorpion jammed in between the tongue of her shoe and the edge of it. I guess it had kind of crawled up in there, and we couldn't get it out when we tried to. So one of the guys, the Nicaraguan guy, said, "That's a scorpion. Are you okay?" And she's like, "Well, yeah, it's a bit red and stuff." So I mean, she got off lucky, right?
Do they hurt?
They can hurt, and apparently, if they're pregnant or something, then it's like 10 times as
venomous. Yeah.
So I mean, we laugh about it now, but
And you saw a parade too, I hear.
A parade
of crabs.
Oh, of crabs. Okay, so jeez. Okay, so envision crabs like the size of your fist, right? And like with their little legs that going sideways all over the place. This was the morning after the big thunderstorm. So this was it was a bit of like the manic trip, right? Like we had these incredible highs of amazing, great experiences, and these incredible lows like the tsunami. And I guess it was the evening after, like the next day after that big tropical storm. And so apparently the crabs, once the rainy season kicks in, the crabs kind of kick up and start cruising around. And we only saw them that one night, but we were coming back. We'd been out to there's a local dance club, nightclub. And we were coming back from that, and we're like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And they're like these crabs kind of, going all over the path and banging around. And it was, initially we didn't know what to make of it. And then it became a bit of a task to make sure they didn't get into our cabins and our huts. Our cabin was fine, but apparently one of the girls, spent a good part of the night kind of making sure that they didn't get underneath the door. And, she referred to it as, like Edward Scissorhands having a go at her bag of clothes, right? If it got in. Anyway.
So I've asked you about the things that
Yeah.
kind of went wrong. Tell us about some of the nice things, and then we'll.
Well, yeah, and not to take a hit on Monty's. It's Monty's. He's got a great place there. He hosts a lot of groups, a lot of people who come down for yoga retreats, community service work, and school groups, faith groups, and he's got a nice place there. Food, and one of our highlights for going there was because he's established it as a surf camp, and so we did. I mean, we're a group of very athletic women, but we're not really surfers, and so we had the opportunity to learn to surf, and then had the boards at our disposal throughout the week. So that was an amazing highlight. The water was beautiful, uncrowded beaches. The people in Nicaragua are, so friendly. I don't know if you found this, but just uncommonly beautiful, like the children.
Yes, and they were so nice, and so I really enjoyed that trip. That was one of my favorite trips I've ever taken.
Yeah. And just the authentic kind of, it's up by a small fishing town. You got to meet people who just had a very simple life, but they were very happy in their simple life. And it really helped kind of reframe what you value. And the volunteering in the soup kitchen, that was an amazing experience. That's an area just north of Chenandaga. And it's basically a camp that I think it's called El Limonono, I think is the name of it. And it was basically set up after Hurricane Mitch as sort of a temporary thing back in 1998. And it's bordered by a garbage dump and a sewage area, and it sounds just god awful. But the opportunity to, and basically 2,000 people still live there in a shanty town. And so we volunteered there. We got things, we made soup for them, helped dispense that, and a very humbling experience, but also a very heartwarming experience. And we also visited the medical center there, and we ended up buying them, some water dispensing unit and some fans for the nurse. And those were very rewarding experiences. I would say, lots of activity. I mean, hiking, surfing, paddleboarding, kayaking. Learning to salsa dance, going out.
That's what I want to do. I'm a horrible dancer, but before I die, I will learn salsa.
We had a ball, and that was great. But it's just, I would say it's just the simple beauty of the country, and also just understanding, because I don't know, you'd share this as well. When you go to a new place, you immerse yourself in the history and the culture, and it was really fascinating. It's a colonial settled, the Spanish, much like a lot of South America and Central America. But to understand that and to frame up the current political turmoil was quite fascinating, because you get to really understand, what's driving things, what's happening. And that's really a whole part of adventure travel as well, is often kind of taking yourself out of the comfort zone. And kind of puts things in perspective, makes you kind of humble and brave at the same time, and also discovering kind of what makes you tick and the personalities of the people that you're with. This is a group of women I've known for 10 years, but it was interesting to see how we responded in these various situations, out of your comfort zone. And we go back to the tsunami thing. It was really fun to review the next morning what was in your evacuation bag. Some of us were right on it. We brought, we had our headlamps and our photocopy of our passport and $100 American cash that we'd managed to stow away, because we'd left our wallets and our passports up in the safe. But other girls had crazy stuff like their bikini bag and their makeup and
oh, how funny.
I mean, it's a group of pretty hardy women, but just hastily they just threw a bunch of stuff together. Somebody had a deck of cards, like she said, like, oh my God, like what's still in this bag, right? And we were just laughing at the sundry of items that we were actually going to be technically leaving the country with. So.
Well, it sounds like you had an amazing adventure. What's next on the agenda? Any place cool?
Gosh, well, you know what? It was funny because right on the edge of this one, I've been before. I would been on doing Route 66 on a motorbike with my husband down in Arizona area right before this, and I came back from that. It was for his 60th birthday, and came back from that and 3 days home, and then took off to Nicaragua. So right in the immediate future, I'm not sure I'm going to get out a jail card for some immediate travel. But you know what? What's next on the? In this summer, I'm going to Europe with my daughter.
Nice.
Yeah, we're doing some touring around, going to Paris. We'll go over to Prague, and get down into northern Italy. We're going to go via Vienna and end up out of Venice. But we're kind of half chasing my son, who's racing with the IDF's International Downhill Federation circuit. He's a skateboard racer, speedboarder, longboarder, whatever you want to call them. And so we're going to see some of his races, but also take in some mom-daughter culture and adventure as well. We'll be doing some hosteling. We'll run the gamma of accommodation experiences.
Very cool. Now you're also a travel blogger as well. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've got a travel blog called carryonqueen.com as a site to publish some of my own writing, which I've put out in a number of publications up here in Canada, and so to share some articles there about my travels, but also to guest host articles from other like-minded adventure travelers. So I'd be happy to have a contribution from you, Kit, at some point.
I'd be loving that. So that'd be great.
Yeah. So that's
to all of the articles on the website. And
sure.
Today's website is going to be activetraveladventures.com/safety.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I'll also put links to your social handles. And is there anything else that we need to know about Mary?
Well, I call myself, I'm a marketing strategist and speaker by profession, but I'm a travel writer by passion. And so in my day life, when I'm not traveling, I work in marketing and advising clients on that. So I'm not one of these, what I would call the vagabond, but the perpetual traveler. I put it in little sequences within my work life. But that having been said, I have a fair bit of freedom to head out.
And for those that are in the marketing, yours is one of the few email newsletters that I actually open and read.
Well, thank you, Kit. I've got 5-minute marketing. I send tips out every Sunday morning, and I call it the forever free advice to a very loyal group of audience. It's something that I enjoy doing, and it also helps feed my business. Because it's something and you've experienced it as well. It's very personable. I ask people to reply back. I actually do exchange with them on Sunday morning, and it's valuable, and it's something that it develops a community, and it feeds my business ultimately because people then know, like, and trust me. So I'll probably try to do something similar to that with carryonqueen.com. Not on a weekly basis though. It'll be less regular than that.
Yeah. Well, great. Again, I'll have links to all that on the show notes and on the website. And Mary, I really appreciate your time, and I love the stories. I'm glad you got back safe. I was a little anxious for you because I was, but I love the country, and I figured once you got out of the city, you'd probably be fine. But Anyway, so glad you came on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Kit. It was awesome. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about it.
It's been a blast.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode and learned a little bit about what you need to do to both protect yourself and to be aware and mitigate any risks that might happen as you travel. And I hope you also got a chance to get a couple laughs out of some of Mary's stories. I encourage you to share this episode with fellow travelers so that we can all travel smart and travel safely. I'll be back next week with the conclusion of the 2-part episode on climbing Kilimanjaro with Cindy Brankin, which is a Hall of Famer episode. And like I said, if you don't even care about climbing Kilimanjaro, it is a great inspirational, motivational story. So I look forward to seeing you next week. I appreciate you listening. And until next week, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on.